Welcome to the Coffee Chat with the Women on Boards team. My name is Pooja Jaira. I work with the Strategy Capacity Building team at ISDM. Women on Boards is a joint initiative by ISDM, DASRA, and Governance Count. The program strives for a more inclusive future of boardrooms in the social sector by equipping women leaders to benefit social impact organizations in a board role. We recently concluded the first cohort. 90% of our cohort has had the initial conversation with the organization. I welcome our panelists for today's session, Aarti Madhusudan, Priyanka Gupta, and Divya Sampath. Aarti is the founder of Governance Count. Priyanka is the lead of the Women on Board program at ISDM. They both are the founding team members of the Women on Boards program. Divya is an alumna from the first cohort. She works as a sponsor and partner at AWE Funds. So we'll spend about 30 to 40 minutes hearing from a panelist. After this, we'll open the space for a Q&A. I request you to please keep posting your questions in the chat box. So Priyanka, we'll start with you. Can you talk about the genesis of the program?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Really excited to see so many people joined us midweek in the evening. Very, very grateful and excited. And also very glad because this little team has come together after a long time having the chat. So Pooja, to answer your question, I think just talking about the genesis of the program brings back a lot of memories. I think it's been like a labor of love for many of us, and we've been kind of brewing this work for past many years. I think it started with Aarti actually being really curious about what do the boards in the Indian social sector context really require, or what do they need, what are they looking out for to make the board practice better so that they can engage better with organizations, help them lead or reach the impact that they're looking to do. And Aarti ran a survey in the sector with, I think, north of 120 organizations, asking them if they were interested to diversify their boards from a gender perspective, and also from having people from outside of the sector. So inviting women from the corporate or other professional sectors, maybe doctors or lawyers or architects, etc., and leverage their skills and leadership for social impact. And it was really, really overwhelming to see that 100 plus organizations said a resounding yes to it. And they were keen on having more women on their board who came from various sectors. And that was really the starting point, I think. And then Aarti started having a conversation with Ravi, who's one of the founders of ISDM and the president here, and also spoke with Neera Nandi, who's the founder of DASRA, and rest is really history. And I still remember that one meeting where 5 of us came together on a call, and we said we want to do some work with women and some work with boards, so how do we bring it all together? And this was almost a year back. It was sometime in August last year. And after that, there has been no looking back. Every meeting we met, our theory, our hypothesis, our planning became clearer. There were a lot more insights that were emerging as to what we wanted to do. And I think the strongest and the most motivating factor was that there was a demand. Organizations were really keen on having people on their boards. The other motivating factor was my conversations with a couple of women who actually have had experience in the corporate world, but now sit on social impact organization boards. And I spoke to them about their challenges or things they would have loved to have when they were starting onto a board role. And just the things they shared, the challenges, the experiences, further strengthened our belief to build this program. And these two really kind of married really well with each other, the demand and people wanting to do such a program. And we just tried to bring all of these learnings together to build the program, and we just graduated our first cohort, and you can see Divya sitting right here with us. Yes, that's my long answer to your question.
Right. Thank you, Priyanka. So my next question is Aarti, that's for you. So why is it important to have women on boards? Because and this question has come up from like a lot of people have posted. They're asking why do we need women on boards?
Okay, so I'll give you a frivolous answer first and I'll give you a more serious answer. I believe that if anything or anyone can change the world, it's women. I don't think we need the men, honestly, but that was just, that's just me. I actually believe it. I actually strongly believe it, but jokes aside, I think there are 2 or 3 reasons why we think, as a group, we thought it was important to focus on women. There is a belief and an assumption that the social sector already has a large number of women. That is not entirely untrue. So a lot of people who work in the social sector or founders, tend to be women. There is no data, there's no research that will give you an accurate number or a percentage as such, but I think that assumption is not far off the mark. However, as leadership evolves and as you look at the organization at the board level, you'll find that the number of people who are sitting on these boards tends to drop, and not generically tends to drop, but in specific areas of expertise, right? So for example, Priyanka talked about the survey we did, and we found that a lot of the need was around women with expertise in technology, marketing, HR, finance, some of these, and there weren't enough women with those kinds of skills, competencies, or experiences on the boards of nonprofit organizations. For us, the reason to focus on women is, of course, it lends to diversity of thought, perspective, and ability to think in a way that we believe will add a lot of value to the way organizations are thinking about change and how they want to take their work and mission forward. But equally important, and maybe slightly more important than the other factor, was our belief is that women are more easily able to, and that there is enough data around this, even though it may not be in our country, but there is enough data to say that women are able to translate experience in one sector onto another, right? So I think the long-term goal and vision and hope is that if we have more women from finance, technology, and all of these other areas serving on boards of nonprofit organizations, that board experience itself is useful for them in their own trajectory. But equally, as they're making decisions in their corporate or professional lives, they're able to do it with a little bit more empathy and compassion, and just thinking about society at large as opposed to just bottom line. And hopefully, because of that, we just create a more compassionate and caring ecosystem for everybody to thrive equally. So I think that is one of the big reasons why we wanted to focus on women.
So Priyanka, can you help us understand the structure of the program, the course structure?
Yes. So the course has been structured in a way that it allows for people to continue working in their full-time jobs and engage with the program well as well. So it's spread across 3 months, and the 3 modules that we cover. I'll leave the talking about the curriculum to Aarti. So I'll just talk about the framework. And so every month we do 1 module, which happens over a weekend, so Friday and Saturday, which also allows people to finish their tasks and come with their complete selves to the module. And then there's a Sunday to kind of be at home, because we recognize that it's a bunch of women who also have other responsibilities apart from work and attending the program. And I'll talk a little bit about how we did cohort 1 and slight changes for cohort 2 as well. So cohort 1, we started in April. In mid-April, we had the first module. And soon after that, we did an immersion where people in their own cities visited organizations, social purpose organizations, spent time with the founder or the CEO. The team visited the community, engaged with people, and really understood and looked at the community from a board member's lens, right? Wearing that hat, which was unique for everybody. And then the second module happened in May. which was again, the first one was virtual, so was the second one. And then in between, the cohort engaged in doing a case study work. They met in small groups virtually and did case studies. And then finally, the third module was an in-person module, which we did in Noida at the ISDM campus, where that's where the cohort met for the first time, which was also followed by a closing ceremony and certificate distribution, like a convocation. And followed by this is the placements process. So there is also a fourth module, which is actually meant for the organizations that partner with us for placements of the cohort on their advisory boards. And the purpose of this session is to prepare the organization to welcome a new board member. We also kind of help them understand the curriculum and the program that the cohort has gone through and the process of placements. And as we talk right now, the cohort is going through the conversations with each of the partner organizations for placements. Many of the conversations have been formalized, and as we talk, it's happening. So this is the broad structure that we followed for cohort 1. And also something that I missed, the very first meeting for the cohort was actually an informal meeting in their own cities again. So the cohort members met their city friends over that lunch, dinner, breakfast, whatever, which was the first time actually when the cohort came together. So we'll follow almost the same structure for cohort 2 with a slight difference, because the feedback that we received from cohort 1 was that they really would have liked if they met earlier as a full group, because that really helps in bonding, getting to know each other, and also impacts learning in the classroom. And when I say classroom, of course, the spaces that you're learning in. So we follow the same structure, which is of informal meet before the program starts. Then the first module happens in mid-September, which will be virtual. Then is the organization immersion, which will be the way it was in your own city, along with a few case studies. And that will happen in the month of October. We're skipping October for a formal module because of the festivals. November is the second module, which we will do in person, as opposed to what we did in cohort 1, to bring the cohort together earlier than the scheduled time. And the third module will happen in December, which will also be in person at an immersive location, which we are yet to decide, but we'll communicate that right after the cohort is finalized, keeping in mind a place that works for most people, which is closer to most people, and therefore we are yet to take a call on that. So those are the slight differences for cohort 2 structure. I'll pause here and request Aarti to add to this.
Yeah, so thanks, Priyanka. So Priyanka sort of talked about the structure in terms of content broadly. The first module will be sort of a window into what is the development sector, you know, what are problems that India is faced with, who is doing what, you know, what's the role of the government, how are non-profit organizations trying to do, play their part, and what are they trying to do, what are the solutions. Just a whole array of perspectives and approaches to, you know, change that, you know, the country needs now. It will involve it'll involve discussions and speaking with founders from the nonprofit sector, but equally people from other sectors who are involved in social change itself. So that's the first module. The second module will be a deep dive into the role of the board itself. So, you know, what does the role of the board in the nonprofit sector look like? What are the nuances? You know, how is it different from a formal board experience? What's the difference between an advisory board and a legal board? Almost all of you will be hopefully joining, you know, once you've done the program, joining organizations as advisors initially, and then progressing on to the legal boards based on mutual interest and comfort and commitment, possibility, and so on. So the second module is a deep dive into the role of the board itself. The third module will be a combination of understanding the structures and processes that drive effective governance. So, you know, everything around how often should a board meet, you know, what should the content look like, how should meetings be conducted, all of that, plus a window into your own selves, right? And that's really critical for us at the end of the program, to be able to reflect on what has changed with me, in me, for me now to be ready or better prepared to sort of start associating with the nonprofit sector and at a board level. So that's sort of in terms of the modules itself. We've taken a lot of feedback from the first cohort. So there are going to be hopefully far more interim engagements around, case studies that you will work in small groups between yourselves and then come back and present to the rest of the cohort. We are considering doing 1 or 2 more immersions as well, depending on what's possible for whom, because if you've missed one immersion, then you sort of just have missed it, right? So how can we sort of enable more of the immersions to happen? So you're meeting a variety of organizations over a growth stage, over a different growth stage that each of them might have, and also hopefully trying to bring that back as learnings, right? So what happened in the first cohort was, people did the immersive experiences, but there weren't too many opportunities to have very deep discussions about what each of them experienced in their immersions, right? So hopefully we'll sort of slot time for that. So essentially the content is going to be heavy. It's going to be far deeper. Plus, we're also looking at inviting a few people who may not be part of the modules as such, but will do one-off sessions on specific areas in between the modules as well. So that's sort of the structure. Priyanka talked about the org preparedness. I think for the second cohort, we will do a lot more deep dive with the organizations than we did in the first cohort. So that we are able to make a selection which is sharper than what we have in the first cohort. So the lead time between introducing the cohort to the organizations and conversion is a little bit lower. So that's sort of the broad plan. And as a group, we'd like to keep learning and adapting without making too many changes as we begin the program and as we hear from you. And also depending on who eventually gets to be part of the second cohort and what parts of the whole program they'd like more emphasis on. I think that's something that we want to leave ourselves open for.
Pooja, I just want to add two very quick things. One is the informal meet will also be very different this time because the cohort members will get to meet alumni in their city.
Correct.
Which the first cohort obviously didn't have an opportunity for, which in my mind is going to be extremely exciting. And the second is that even when the formal program is over, which is the end of 3 months and almost 4 months for the second cohort, we will continue to support and mentor you in your journey as a board member in your new role. So that also is very, very critical, which I missed sharing. So yeah.
Yeah, and also we've identified a few, individuals who, once the initial conversations for the first cohort are over, and for the second cohort as well, with the organizations who, a bunch of individuals who have board experience have sort of offered to be, mentors. If you want to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I'm stuck with this, what should I do? So there are a bunch of people like that. And once the placements are sort of getting to a close, that bunch will get introduced as well to both the first and the second cohort.
Thanks, Aarti. I just have a question regarding the placements. Can you just briefly tell us what happens when the program concludes? So far, we've talked about the first module, the informal city meets, and the first module, second and third. So once the program concludes, can you just give us a brief about the placements?
So the way that the placement has been conceived or had been conceived was we reached out to organizations essentially who filled that survey, that very first survey for 150 or 128 organizations. Between us, we had conversations with all of them, many of them, not all of them, but many of them either on email or on phone, to understand why they were saying they needed a certain profile of individual. We shortlisted from that. We sent the list of organizations we will send the list of organizations to the cohort to say, okay, which of these sort of rings a bell, because you'll see in the application form, you're also seeking your interest and alignment to a specific cause. I do want to clarify that, that's just for us to sort of get a broad direction. It's not necessary that the cause that you pick 100% you will be placed with that organization, because equally the organization must also find your profile as essential for their board. So that happens on the one hand. On the other hand, to the organizations, we will send the profiles of the cohort members to pick from, right? And they will prioritize, one or three. Many of them have been and are likely to be generally okay with anybody from the cohort, or they will come back very clearly and say, look, I already have a person from marketing or HR on my board. I don't need another person on the board. Once that match happens, we set up individual conversations between organizations and the cohort members. Is usually a choice of at least two, if not more. And then the placement will happen based on feedback from both ends. It is an evolving process. I don't think, we will get it 100% right in the first call. Anyway, people need to have a few calls. They'll need to meet. You can do the matching on the basis of profile, but hey, you can't predict chemistry, right? So we've had one of the people who've said, I love the organization, I love what they're doing, but I can't put my finger on it, and I don't think that this is the right fit. And so, like Priyanka said, our goal is that however long it takes, and it, like Pooja mentioned right at the beginning, all the conversations have at least happened 100%, except for one person, right? The goal is that as long as it takes, and hopefully within 6 months, everybody will be sort of deeply engaged with one or two organizations. So that's sort of where we are headed.
Right. Thank you, Aditi. Now I'll introduce our alum, Divya. So hi, Divya. We would love to hear your experience. How was it to be a part of the first cohort?
First of all, overall, the experience was incredible, outstanding, totally worth the time. And I'm sure you'll also, like me, if you're part of the next cohort, I'm sure you'll make some connections and some new friends who you hope to carry with through the rest of your life. You'll meet some incredible women as part of the cohort. Let me take a step back though, Pooja, and sort of describe my starting point, because I think a lot of the women in the audience may also have their own individual situations in life, and why this program aligned with me, and maybe folks can relate to that as well. So like many of you, I spent more than 26 years in the corporate world, in a career that was focused mostly on technology and consulting, and I ran and incubated a lot of businesses and scaled them, and I had a lot of success. But at some point I started thinking, and again, like most of you, I'm sure there were, social purpose organizations, non-profits that you've donated to, maybe even volunteered, maybe played a larger role with. But somewhere in the back of my mind, there was this desire to do more, to give back, particularly in areas that were very closely aligned to causes that were close to my heart. Right. So for me personally, gender issues are very important because I spent my career in technology. Bridging the digital divide is very important. For me, broadly, sustainability in the environment is very important. And the more you think about this, most of us spend time, giving that annual check, or, these days bank transfer, or you may donate on Give India or MillUp, or somebody sends you a mailer and you respond to that. But you start thinking, what more can I do? And how do I personally started thinking about, if I really want to have larger impact, how do I start doing that? And I was a little motivated by two things. One is that when I was talking to my father, he's passed away now, he was telling me that, if you want to start doing things, don't think of it as a post-retirement activity. You need to start preparing for it 10 years before retirement. So by the time you retire, you're ready to fully get into it. So that was one thing. And I also managed to meet Aarti in between, which is a wonderful meeting. It was last November, I believe. And we met in a coffee shop and we had a wonderful conversation. And I heard all about what she does at Governance Counts, and, her passion for really improving the way that the nonprofit sector operates, right? And that kind of struck a chord in me as well. All of those different threads kind of aligned. And I really, the more I thought about it, the more I realized. But the one thing that I did take away from my life in the corporate sector was, if you really want to have an impact, of course, you can act as a leader in whatever level you are. But one of the best ways to start making an impact on an organization is to be in a position of leadership, where you can influence how the organization thinks and works. So I thought, how do I do that? And that's when the idea of this cohort-based program that ISDM and Governance Council, that's put together, came up. And it seemed like really serendipitous to me, because it was almost like exactly what I would have wanted to get me started into a completely new sector as well, right? Because like many of you, I was also in a situation saying, where do I start? There has to be a first step, right? And like many of us, I always feel a little uncomfortable thinking, I don't know enough about this to get in, right? So here was a program that to my mind ticked all of the three magic boxes. A, it was going to give me knowledge and information, which I craved, right? And introduction about the sector and how it works. Secondly, it was going to introduce me to a network of wonderful peers, as well as, of course, senior people who've been in the sector through the through the faculty and the modules and so on and so forth. And thirdly, it was going to introduce me to a variety of interesting organizations that I could then start, trying to understand a bit more and get started. So for me, it checked all of these three boxes. But more than that, once I got involved in the program, it gave me a lot more. So I can talk for hours about it, but I'll just, call out a couple of highlights that stood out for me, right? One is, at some level, I think, all of us will have had successes and failures in life, but broadly, I think mostly the women who apply for the cohort have reached a certain level of success in life and have done reasonably well, and therefore in a position to start giving back. So you're used to being generally in a room, if not the most knowledgeable, one of the most knowledgeable people on the subject that you're talking about. When you move sectors, you're now moving into something that's the reverse. You will be the least knowledgeable person in the room, right? What the cohort gave me with this amazing group of peers was, despite all the different life experiences and backgrounds that people have had, the different journeys that they've taken, the different journeys we're going to continue to take, right? It gave me sort of the comfort to say, okay, I don't have all the answers, so what? I'm learning like everybody else, right? And being with these amazing women actually gave me, in a weird way, I don't know if I can even convey this, but it kind of gave me the emotional permission to say that, yeah, I don't have all the answers, so what, right? So that was one. I will say to all of you that there is so much more, and I'm sure we've all read stuff. I remember reading, Arti, you were talking about, lack of data in the sector. There are a couple of good reports that I've been reading, which I know are kind of limited. Dasrap came out with one a few years ago, which I read. The Bridge Span group did another report. The key takeaway is, the size of the issue in India is very large. So what you call during one of the modules, we heard about the denominator problem. If you look at the problem from the denominator problem side. What we mean by that is, we have more than 25 crore people living on a daily income of less than 150 rupees a day. And another statistic that, again, but by the way, I learned during the module, it's not that I wasn't aware, but it drove it home, was that our government spends less than 1.4% of our GDP on healthcare services, which is less than half what not even other developed nations, other developing nations are spending, right? If you look at education services again. So essentially, we talk about this triangle. For any functioning society to grow and thrive, you have this triangle between the government, the private sector, and the social sector, or what, as Ravi puts it, you'll hear this phrase a lot from Ravi, is that Sarkar, Samaj, Bazaar triangle, right? And the non-profit sector, the social purpose sector, plays such a key role in India, particularly in bridging that gap, right? And will continue to have to bridge that gap. If you look at the size of the problem, so much is needed. And I can't help but feel, like everyone else on this panel, that having more committed women with diverse experiences, including from the corporate sector, involved in leadership roles, can really help to increase the impact of the sector. The change has to start here, right? A journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Maybe we're starting with 100 steps with the 100 women who are going to come out of this program. And let's see what magic that creates for the country. My hope is we can have, let's not underestimate the impact that a group of women like this can have on the social sector and on the country at large. I'll stop there.
We haven't bribed Divya. I want to put that out there.
Unless you count buying me pastries at.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe. Okay. Thanks, Divya. Yeah, Pooja, back to you.
So, thank you, Divya. I think we'll open the space for Q&A. So participants can type in their questions in the Q&A chat box. So Divya, while they're doing, I have a question for you. Can you talk, like you've been a student like in these 3 months. Can you talk about like how was it, like how demanding was this course? Like how did you prepare for the course?
I thought the great thing about the course that it was demanding, yes, but it was also demanding in a way that allowed me to balance that with the demands of day-to-day work, right? I'm sure a substantial number, if not the majority of the next cohort will also be in full-time jobs, right? And they may be thinking, do I have the time to actually invest in the cohort? The way that the modules were designed, because they're actually weekend, Friday, Saturday design sessions, and including the immersion sessions and all of the rest of the activities in the program, I thought it was very well done because it was also well spaced out. So for me, I thought it was well designed to match my lifestyle requirements. And I think I can confidently speak because the rest of the cohort also talked about this. All of us were able to kind of balance and make the time to attend the sessions and also learn and participate. The other thing that it does is because you're only doing one key module in a month, you get a lot of information that you're trying to absorb and make sense of in your own mind. It gives you the time to digest. It gives you the time to work on it, come up with your questions and clarifications, and take that to the next module as well. So from that perspective, I thought the design of this program, of course, there's always room for improvements. And I think both Priyanka and Aarti have talked about some of the suggestions from us that they've incorporated already into the next cohort session. But I do want to reassure all of you that if you're in a full-time job, please rest assured that as long as, because it's well planned and you have the days also announced well in advance, I suspect that the vast majority of you will be able to quite easily manage to fit that into your schedules. With that said, I will say it's very demanding, especially the first module may be kind of it's like a fire hose of information gets opened and thrown at you. So you'll spend a lot of time trying to absorb and digest and make sense of the information, but it's good for you. At least it was for me. I kind of, we all felt that later. I think at the end of the first day, most of us were kind of in shell shock, but by second day, we were kind of easing into the information, and it did help us. It really opened our eyes a lot about the sector at large. Did that answer the question, Pooja?
Yes, I think we had. So the next question is, where is the institution based of? So the campus is in Noida. The second module will happen here. So you will be expected to travel to Noida to attend the second module. Aarti, we have a question.
There are several questions. I'm going to ask Priyanka to take one or two of them, which is, so I think, I can't see, Bhagirathi says she's going to be traveling most of November. What would you recommend? So Bhagirathi, I think it's really important. The second module, which will happen in November, is really the one of, I mean, all three are very important, but the second one will focus on the role of the board. And what that will entail. Very critical that you do attend it. So I would, and that's going to be in person as well. So I would really recommend that you try and plan travel, unless you're traveling out of the country. Try and plan travel in a way that you can attend the second module.
I think I can respond to a couple.
Yes, please, if you can. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah. So Sheetal is just saying it's inspiring to hear from Divya and Aarti regarding the idea of group of women building each other. Thank you, Sheetal. Deepika is asking about the tentative size of the cohort. So Deepika, we really want to keep a small cohort because as much as we believe the cohort learns from the faculty and people who come to interact, the cohort learns a lot from each other, and I'm sure Divya would agree. And therefore, we'll always try to do two things. One, keep it extremely diverse and keep it small, so that there's a lot of strong bonding that happens. And our first cohort was 24. And even for the second, we're looking approximately at the same number, max to max 25, 26 is what we're looking at. Uma is asking, the in-person modules are only in person, or will there be an online recorded sessions? Since we don't know where and when these will be and unable to commit to attending at this time. So When they will be is something you know. We have put it all up on our website, the dates. And for the first in-person module, which is the second module, we also know where it is. So you basically have that information. The third module, you do know where it is. Again, the dates are up on the website. Where will it be? That you will know soon, which is as soon as early September. The in-person modules are only in person because, again, it's difficult to engage people who are present in person. It affects their learning. People who are present online, it affects their learning too. So we really encourage people to be present in the mode that the format is running. And we did see that, honestly, in our third module as well, where the entire cohort was present in person, but 2 people had an emergency and they just couldn't make it, and we had got them to join online. But of course, their learning wasn't the same as everybody else's. They really missed being with the rest of the cohort in the fun and all the celebration as well. So would really encourage for you to clear your calendars, be available, etc. if you're keen on the program. What is the mindset approach that is expected, ideal for one who's registering for the program, in addition to a base feeling of wanting to do more? That's a great question. Aarti, I would request you to take that up.
Yeah.
And also add a little bit about the expectations, which we've, I think, broadly covered. Expectations from the participants for the program.
Yeah, so I will, sort of start off by saying what we at least hope that the expected mindset should be, and I'm going to ask Divya to jump in there as well. So the expectation is definitely, we need people to come to this with a sense of humility. It sounds practically old-fashioned, but with a sense of humility, with the ability to listen, have enormous patience, come to it with a sense of service, to say that, I am here because it's good for me. It will help me do things that, I have in mind or I want to be involved with. Not jump into solutioning and not sort of come to this saying that, I'm head of finance or marketing in XYZ company, so I will come here and tell this organization how they can do their finance or marketing or HR or whatever, right? Because it's a very, very different world. And this is not to say that you're not likely to have a lot of the answers. You're very likely to have a lot of the answers, but just from the point of enabling the recipient of your experience and expertise to be more open and more willing, I think it needs to be faced into listening, wanting to learn, understanding deeply, and then coming to it with suggesting and saying, hey, do you want to try this approach or not, right? Because what you will find is that many of the people that you will interact with on the nonprofit side have really given their lives to it. I mean, there are, we've met people as young as in their 20s to people in their 70s and 60s, and all of whom could have had very different lives and far more comfortable careers. So just respecting that, but not, I am being mindful that of course there will be gaps that, you will be able to help with, but very clearly come to it with a sense of purpose for yourself, and not as a, I mean, none of you is going to be an unpaid consultant, right? That's not the idea. Divya, is that okay? Do you want to add something to this, please? I would really like for you to do that.
I would absolutely agree with what Aarti said. I'll add something from a different dimension, right? Again, because like many of you in corporate worlds, basically you are rewarded for rapid decision making, right? With the ability, so essentially you get a lot of information thrown at you. The ability to synthesize that information, make sense of it, and then take a quick decision is the kind of behavior that is encouraged and rewarded in the corporate world, right? So if you're from the corporate world like me, that's been encouraged. But context matters. So even if you're talking about a finance issue or a fundraising issue or a HR issue or a marketing issue in a social sector organization, it's important to go in and understand that even if parts of the problem sound familiar to you, the shape of the problem may look completely different. It's that story of that 6 blind men in a room with an elephant, right? From what you're hearing, you'll probably think that part of it sounds like a rope, but you'll actually discover that behind that rope is actually the tail of an elephant, and there's an elephant there, right? So I would say that coming into the sector, it was very important for me personally and for others. And I would encourage all of you to have the mindset of let's listen and understand, and maybe make sure we really understand all the dimensions of what it is we're hearing before you're tempted to start offering potential solutions. Now, it's easy to say, and it's very hard to practice, and I include myself, because it's the exact opposite of the behavior that you've been encouraged to, that's actually been actively rewarded, and that's driven your success for many, many years. But it is something that requires a conscious, intentional adjustment is what I would say, from, looking at the problem in a very practical, personal fashion. The other element that I would say is that, you learn a lot of respect for people in the social sector when you go out in an immersion program and meet some of the people and hear them tell their stories. I was actually making this comment after our immersion visit to our first, to our SPO, that the head of that organization, I work a lot with startups, right? I've both invested in and I advise, and I'm in the venture capital world, so we see a lot of startup CEOs. If if some of those CEOs had seen a fraction of the problems on a day-to-day basis that this CEO is having to confront, and is not being obviously, making big money or anything like that, right? People in the private sector, most of the CEOs I know would have run away from that situation, right? So it taught me, and I think you will also come to realize this, an enormous amount of respect for the people who are doing this work, right? And the passion and the commitment that they have. So that in itself, to sort of support what Aarti is saying, I think reinforces the sense of humility that we ought to have when coming into the sector. And, try to be, as I would say, all of us coming in, one of the best things you can do is probably just open up and be a sponge, trying to absorb as much information. With that said, I will say you have a lot to contribute, right? That's why this program exists, because all of us women have a lot of valuable things to contribute. But let's not be in a hurry to start contributing from day zero before we've even completed the program. Contribute, and of course, in the discussions, we want to hear from, I love listening to all of the different points of view and opinions of the life stories of all of the other women in the cohort. That's fantastic. But this temptation to jump in and say, hey, I have the solutions. Why aren't these people already doing this? That's something that perhaps we should hold back on before we know a little bit more about the specific situation.
So Divya, there's another question for you. E.T. is asking how much peer-to-peer learning was possible, since it's a set of women who bring a lot of expertise across sectors.
Enormous. I would say, take all of the amazing learning that we got from the modules and the content itself, right? I personally, and I'm sure many of my cohort members would say the same, learned a lot more when I was actually, because there are activities like Aarti and Priyanka both mentioned. There are, for example, caselets that you'll be working on in many groups, right? There are many situations where you'll be working with smaller groups of the women in your cohort. Believe me, that itself, each time, if you have a group of 5 women and you hear these very different, some of them have completely different backgrounds, right? Some of them actually had been in the social sector for a while. We had a doctor, we had somebody from the construction sector, and it's a sector that's completely dominated by men. We had finance experts, we had people from such diverse backgrounds, right? And when they actually bring their point of view, I personally learned so much just listening to all of those different points of view. That it multiplied my own learning, because it made me realize very consciously that for every idea I had, there could be 6 other better ideas out there from people who had come at this, who were looking at this from a different perspective, right? And that just multiplied my own learning and my own sort of openness to say, okay, hey, wow, there are people who are like, who have all these different amazing viewpoints that I can learn from. So, and trust me, like I said at the beginning, you will make a few connections during this. There are people who you will meet, whom you will admire and sort of, want to keep in your life long term, right? You'll build those connections. That's one of the amazing parts of this cohort.
Thank you, Divya. We'll take Sheetal's question. There are more in-person sessions meets this year. Will the dates be shared in advance so that we can block our calendar? Sheetal, the dates are already up on the website. So I will just request you to have a look and then you can block your calendar. what is the screening process of the applications? Priyanka, you can answer this
I
question?
take that, yes. So Deepika. So Deepika, we have an elaborate application which we expect the applicants to fill. It takes basic information, your education, work experience, and a few questions that really help you reflect on why are you really looking to join this program. It also helps you deepen your understanding of what this program is really trying to offer. So it serves a dual purpose. Post the application, there is a screening for basic eligibility criteria meeting, etc. And we are really strict, let's say, for a lack of a better word, on our basic eligibility criteria, because we want to ensure that it's a power-packed cohort. So we shortlist applications, and then we set up panel conversations where each applicant who goes through the application gets an opportunity to speak with senior leaders who are either from the social, corporate, or cross-sectoral experience, with whom you can have a conversation, interact, ask questions, clarify doubts, etc. And it's really an opportunity for the leaders to see what's happening with the Women on Boards program, what kind of cohort is coming in, and for the cohort to have their questions answered. So that's an experience. And there's also a shortlist post that, and then we invite people to join the program. So we do have a longish and a rigorous process to select the cohort.
Thanks, Priyanka. Priyanka, talking about the eligibility criteria, we had a question on the eligibility criteria. I think some of them wanted to know, like, how important is it for the program? Maybe Aarti, you can also add in.
Yeah, Aarti, do you actually want to start off, and I'll add in case I...
So I think there are a few basic fundamental criteria, and then Priyanka can jump in. We are looking at women with at least 15 years of work experience in the corporate sector primarily. That is really one. The second is the ability to complete the course itself, right? I mean, we want to be very, very sure that when you sign up, you're signing up for all 3 modules almost entirely. The third is the willingness to, of course, share your experience and expertise with the organizations that hopefully you will get placed on. The fourth is a question that often, is in people's minds, is how much time will I need to give as an advisor? I hate giving a number because I believe that, time stretches based on engagement. Everybody has 24 hours. Nobody has a minute more or a minute less. And it's only how you prioritize, your time. That is all that is different. So in my experience of, being in the sector and working with nonprofits for almost 20 years, I find that advisors who say I can give 1 hour a month or I can give 3 hours a month, I have known many who give 3-4 days, right? Because they just get so drawn into the cause and they're engaged really well. But if you're asking for a number, and it's probably there in the application form somewhere, then we are saying that a minimum of 6 to 8 hours a month. And this is not obviously physical meeting or interaction alone. It includes everything, just mind space. And that's the fourth thing. The fifth thing is your willingness to open up your own networks and connections for the organizations that you are going to be interacting with or placed with. And we are not saying that that necessarily needs to happen in the first 2 months. Of course, you need to have great comfort, but we are all networked, and as South Asians, we are all connected, I think, by 2 or 3 degrees of separation only. The sector needs as much support and as many people as is possible to sort of get involved. And so that is very, very important. So if you are saying, look, I don't want to bring in my connections, I'm not going to ask anybody for any help, then that is actually, it is a potential deal breaker. So we're not saying that needs to happen instantly. I want to reiterate that it can happen over over your interactions with the organization at a period of time that you're comfortable with, but that's important. So be very mindful of that. There is another question about being paid. This is completely pro bono. It's voluntary. There is no payment whatsoever. Some organizations might offer you, travel if you have to travel for the board meeting, but that is something that you can discover, in your first conversations with them. With everything being possible online, and with the sector really struggling with funding, I think a lot of board meetings are also moving online. But I would encourage you to try and visit the organization and the community especially that they work with, even if you need to do it on your own at least once. What else? Yeah, I think this is sort of broadly broadly some of the eligibility criteria. Priyanka, I don't know if I've missed anything.
No, I think you've covered that. The just willingness to really immerse yourself and being okay with the emergence, and being okay with the discomfort that will come with the new information and what this sector is really about. There is a question about the selection criteria, which I've already spoken about. Preeti, to your question, we'll be thrilled if the number of applicants exceeds the ideal size, and that did happen in the first cohort as well. And we invited a bunch of those people to join us in the second cohort. And you will meet people who actually enrolled, got selected, and blocked their seat at the first cohort as well, who will be there in the second cohort. So that's the thing we follow. There's a question from Neha. I think you want to put that up.
Yeah, I'm just trying to scroll, and
he's saying, would this program be relevant for women who act as nominee directors, board members on startups?
Do you want me to speak to that?
Yes, Divya, I was going to lead. Yeah, I was going to give it to you. Yeah.
All right. So Neha, that's a great question. I would say that it's let me answer that in two parts. In terms of immediate relevance and sort of long-term relevance, right? Yes, there are things that you will learn in this program which are broadly applicable principles, both in the for-profit and non-profit world, right? But with that said, if you are thinking long-term of, trying to apply the same techniques necessarily both in the non-profit and for-profit world, I would say that's an idea to be a little bit careful about, because each organization and each situation is very unique and very different. So just as you would, if you are working on two different startups who may be in two different situations, you wouldn't necessarily work in the same way because their problems and cultures and market environments might be different. It's important to, I think, maintain that focus of saying, I need to look at the organization, its mission, its particular context and situation, and apply my skill sets there. So that's from a sort of a more tactical, immediate perspective. Longer term, I would say, again, drawing from my own sort of corporate career and, somebody was a leader, I'll say two things. One is most multinational organizations today do look at, for promotion to even corporate boards, etc. People look at a diversity of leadership roles that people have played, including board experience on nonprofits. So if you are working for a fairly forward-looking organization in the private sector, the experience that you gain working in an advisory role or even a legal board of a nonprofit will come in handy on your resume. It is something good to have if you want to look at it from that sort of, it's a self-serving perspective, but it's a valid perspective. You are getting something back for the time and passion and effort that you're investing in this. It does sort of serve in that sense. So from a longer term perspective, it would be relevant if you intend to continue to straddle both worlds, right, in the for-profit and non-profit world. And I think, specifically on the question of people working on startups, will this specifically prepare you for being functional in the startup world? I think there are other programs which might suit your purpose better if that's the primary goal. But if your intent is to be someone who's going to be active in both the for-profit and non-profit world and wants to understand how you can operate effectively as a board member in those worlds, this would be, I think, a relevant program. So hopefully that answered the question in the way that you intended, or the context that you intended.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Divya. I just wanted to add one more thing, and maybe this is helpful for others as well, which is that, let's say you're a finance person or a marketing person, right? The kind of experience or the kind of responses that you might provide in your own company are likely to be very, very different to what you might provide in the nonprofit context, because in the nonprofit context, everything is linked, right? I mean, you can be a great finance guy or a great marketing person, and it won't work in the same way at all. So I think what this will provide is the ability to be agile and to be innovative. right? So like, very classic example, and I won't take too long, but is an example of an organization that needed some help. And, she was one of the people who sort of spoke in our first cohort, needed some help around marketing the issue of child sexual abuse. And she had two people on her board. This was way back 10-15 years ago. One of them, very senior marketing guy, another guy, very senior finance guy. And the marketing guy said, yeah, it's quite easy. I mean, Bombay has local trains, so, and flyovers. So we just need hoardings that scream that this is an issue in Bombay, that 1 out of every 2 children is exposed to some form of child sexual abuse. And so the founder then said, okay, that sounds like an easy enough thing, but what will it cost? And the number at the back of the envelope back then was about, I think, 12 or 15 lakhs, right? And the finance guy was also on the board, and they were both classmates in B school. He said, I'm not going to give you 1/100th of this. We don't have that kind of money. And so they went into this long discussion of how could they still achieve the same impact with 1/100th or 1/50th of that amount, right? And so that's sort of the translation of the skill set and experience and responses that you might be able to have in your corporate sector, in the nonprofit sector, and vis-a-vis, right? So, and he actually went back saying that I now realize how much money I'm wasting in my own company, and how it's possible to do things far more simply. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Priti. Okay, there's one more last question. Yeah, from Sheetal on the social sector. Are you looking at getting women from the social sector? Purely social sector? Probably not. So we've had a few people in the first cohort who have had significant experience in the corporate sector before they moved into the nonprofit sector. And so that profile is something that, will get considered. But if there is somebody who's just, spent all her time and life and education and experience in the social sector, then that's unlikely to make the cut.
Can I just elevate Baghi's question a little bit, because it's kind of one that we should all recognize? Somebody asked her this question. So what she's written is, somebody asked me this question and I wanted to hear the answer to. Men get invited to boards with no formal training. Why do we need one for women? I thought we should address that one.
Yeah, so Divya, you want to take that first?
Thanks for putting me on the spot. I think there's, like Aarti would do, I'll split this into a sort of a frivolous question and a serious question. It's because women do homework before we show up and men don't. And everybody knows that. That's the humorous answer. But the serious question is, the higher mountain to climb is to get more women onto boards.
Correct.
And having sort of a institutional support with a formal program makes it easier than each woman trying to do it on her own, right? So if you want to start a movement, it's better to do it with a group. And having a program like this, I think, gives us a platform where we can at least get things started. Is this all that's going to be needed? Obviously not. I'm sure a lot more effort will be required over time for us to change the culture. But Baghi, I think that was a fantastic question.
Yeah, it was.
And of course, the rest of you should also answer it.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, just adding to what Divya said, I think we're looking at two things, right? So I made this point right at the beginning. I think there is enough evidence out there that women are able to translate experiences between sectors. So while the goal is to get more women in leadership positions onto the nonprofit sector, that's not the only goal, right? I'm saying that if I'm a woman and I've done this thing in the program and I'm on the board of a nonprofit, my ability to take that experience back to my own workplace and be a role model there and be an ambassador for more women to doing this is far higher. And for us as an overall, goal, we just want more women to be out there in positions of leadership and, sort of get the men out, not out, but, we just want to be able to be the voice of influence, right? And I think because our voices will be louder, can be amplified a lot more. There is enough, even in India, there is enough study, for example, in the panchayat system, where they're finding that when women are elected to power, they will tend to focus more on the social problems in the village, right? They want to see better nutrition, they want to see better school enrollment, they want to lower age of marriage. The men want the roads, right? So I think it's just that we believe that we need more women, not just in the social sector, but the ability to take that back to the corporate sector as well. I mean, the men aren't doing it, right? So training or not training, not doing enough of it at least. So, yeah.
Pooja, I just want to add a quick thing. There was a query on the chat. So for everything that says to be decided on the website, that's primarily because it involves a small group coming and working together, or working with an outside stakeholder, which is the organization immersion. And that's dependent on the number of people in the cities. And only when the cohort is decided, we would know which cities are they from and which organization to partner, and finally decide a date. And that's why it's to be decided. And so is the case study and informal meets. And therefore, you'll know of the dates closer to the event than so much more in advance. I hope that clarifies
Yeah. What is the expected batch size for cohort 2? I think we're looking at might be around 25.
20, yeah. In the
20,
25
25,
to 27.
Yeah, we won't exceed that number. So thank you so much. I think we have come to the end of the coffee chat. I'm sharing the link to the application form. Please remember the last date. We are closing the applications on the 7th of August. So I've shared the application form on the chat. And I would urge everyone who's still writing their application to please finish it and do reach out to us for any clarification.